Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and today we have a real treat, the best treat of all. Nice and sugary and sweet. No, he does it. He did that for a little bit. No, his name's Drew Manning. If you haven't heard of him, I don't know where you've been, honestly, because he's been on national television, probably international television at this point. And he's created a movement of people who are, one, committed to being healthy and giving hope to people who literally may have lost hope or thought, it can never happen for me. I'm too old. I'm too whatever, right? Too many exceptions. He's saying, let's identify your exception and I'll put myself in your situation and then show you that it's possible to climb out. So I'm so excited for this. I've been looking forward to it for, probably like half a year, 6 months or so, to get him on here. And finally he has time. So thank you so much, Drew, for showing up. Go ahead and share your story and really why you're doing what you're doing.
So my journey starts actually before I got into health and fitness, because I grew up in a family of 11 brothers and sisters, and we all played sports. So I played football and wrestling from a very young age. And so I was always very active. And because of that, I was naturally skinny and in shape because I had to work out really hard to play these sports. And so it was always a part of my life, being into, somewhat of a fitness routine. And in 2009, I decided to become certified as a personal trainer. And here I was, someone who had never been overweight a day in my life, trying to help people who were overweight pretty much the majority of their life. And there's an obvious disconnect between what I understood was easy and what they understood as what was hard for them. And in my mind, I'm like, you guys, it's so easy. Just follow the meal plans, follow the workouts that I give you, put down the junk food and the soda, and then boom, you see the results. It's not that hard. And obviously my clients would try to stay consistent and they would do well, and then they would mess up and I would get frustrated, right? I would get frustrated with them. Like, why can't you just do this? Like, you just do it and it's not that hard. And so anyways, one of my clients told me, Drew, you don't understand what it's like for you. For you, you've always been in shape. For you, it's easy. For me and for people like me, it's really, really hard to do that. And so I'm like, you know what? You're right. I don't understand why it's so hard for people. Okay, let me try and think of ways I can gain a better understanding. And then for whatever reason, this idea popped up in my head and this light bulb went off. Almost like it felt like a calling, like I was called to do this thing, this crazy experiment to get fat on purpose, right? And so back in 2011, I had this idea. I asked my wife at the time if it was okay with her. And she was like, yeah, you should totally do that. And so did all my friends and family. And so I started a website, a YouTube channel. And before you know it, I decided for 6 months I was going to let myself go completely. No exercise, an unrestricted standard American diet for 6 months. Ended up gaining 75 pounds in those 6 months of pure fat, right? Because there was no exercise. And it was one of the hardest, most humbling things I've ever done. And this whole story went viral. I went on a bunch of TV shows like Jay Leno and Dr. Oz and Good Morning America, and wrote a book, and the book became a New York Times bestseller. But along the way, there were so many valuable lessons that I learned that I'm sure we'll get into all the details behind that. But it was very eye-opening. And I realized just how wrong I was in my approach to helping people. How wrong I was when I would tell people, look, you just do it. Like, stop complaining and just do it. Because now my eyes were open to this whole new world of, how much of transformation is more mental and emotional than we think. The emotional connection to food is way more powerful than we think. And I was truly humbled and had to learn these lessons firsthand from doing this experiment. And, I got back to fit, of course, after, a year of doing this whole journey with a whole new perspective. And now, I'm on this mission to bring more empathy and more awareness of the mental and emotional side of transformation that people have no idea exists, because we all think it's just about macros and calories and weight loss, and it's so simple in people's minds. But unless you've been overweight or you understand those mental and emotional struggles, it's hard to have empathy for people when you've never really gone outside your comfort zone to understand what it's like. And so that's kind of what Fit2fat2fit version 1.0 did for me.
Awesome. So let's talk about, I'm curious, what was the biggest unexpected, like going into it, you probably had one view of like, oh, I'm going to get fat, and then it's going to be really easy to get back to fit. What was the biggest unexpected barrier, either getting fat, even like allowing yourself to get fat? Because that's a whole nother thing. If you've grown up your whole life, because this is going through complete identity shifts of an individual. And I have my own story to share after this, but I'm curious, what was the biggest unexpected thing gaining weight, like allowing yourself to gain weight? And was that difficult? And then on the other side, what was the biggest unexpected thing trying to lose weight again?
Yeah, I'll answer both those questions. So basically, on the journey of gaining weight, the biggest unexpected lesson was the whole identity crisis that you mentioned. Because you have to understand, in my mind, my entire life, I was Drew the fit guy, Drew the guy with a six pack, Drew the guy with muscles, right? Like that was my identity. And becoming overweight was an identity crisis where I'll be totally honest with you, I kind of freaked out. It's like I wanted to go up to strangers in public and explain to them that I really wasn't overweight. This was just an experiment, that I wasn't like I normally don't look this way. And I wanted to go tell people that, right? Because I was so uncomfortable in my own skin, because my identity was my body image. Like my body image was my self-image until I went through that identity crisis. And so that's where I started to realize transformation is way more mental and emotional than people think. And it does have to do with our identity. Some people who have been overweight their entire life, it's true for them too. Their identity is their body. I am Joe, the overweight guy, right? And they tell themselves that over and over again. That's why a lot of people who lose the weight end up getting the weight back, because even though they've lost the weight, in their mind, their identity is still the overweight version of themselves. Does that make sense? Absolutely. So that was kind of the unexpected lesson on the journey of gaining weight. I would also say the mental and emotional challenges that came with being overweight. There was one time where my daughter, who was 2 at the time, she wanted to play with me when I got home from work, and I was exhausted. I was tired. I was overweight, and she wanted me to chase her around the house. And so I would chase her for a couple minutes. And after a couple minutes, I'm exhausted because I'm out of shape. I can't exercise. So I was like huffing and puffing. Plus I was exhausted from the day of work. And then, she's trying to pull me off the couch when I needed to take a break. And she's like, "Daddy, come play, please, please." And then she started crying. Because I was like, "No, I can't play with you because Daddy's too tired. I need to rest." And she didn't understand, but it broke my heart to see her so sad because that her own dad couldn't play with her. And it made me realize that there's so many people out there, probably millions of people, that can't play with their kids or their grandkids, not so much because of their weight, but because of their health, and how much that must hurt as an adult to not be able to play with your kids because of your unhealthy situation. So those were some unexpected lessons on the journey of gaining weight. On the journey of losing weight, I kind of compare it to my whole life. I've been on top of this mountain, right? And I'm comfortable up there. And yeah, I work hard to maintain that physique and look good. And my clients are down at the bottom. For me, it was kind of like coming off that mountain for the first time. And now I had to experience what it's like to climb up that mountain from the bottom, which is what a lot of my clients experience. And that's where they start. And they can't quite get to the top because they keep falling back down. They keep self-sabotaging or giving up on themselves. And so they just have to start from that bottom point. And from the bottom to get to the top seems so impossible for some people. It's like, how am I ever going to get to that point? And for me to experience that was one of the most humbling things, but also one of the most empathetic things for me to realize, man, this journey up is way harder than I thought it was. Because on top, when you're sitting up there on top comfortably, the path looks so easy. You're like, yeah, just come up here and they stop falling back down and just keep going. And it's not that hard. Like, don't give up on yourself. And you think it's so easy because you can see the path pretty clearly, but from the bottom, it's a totally different perspective. And so, the how hard it was to get back to fit mentally and physically was another unexpected lesson.
So with the identity shift, gaining weight, do you feel like by the end of the 6 months when you were I would say wildly overweight, right? I don't know, maybe you're not. I know people who are 400 pounds, so maybe you weren't wildly overweight, but
it's all relative, right?
It's all relative, right? But do you feel like your identity at the peak of your weight, do you feel like there was an actual even though you were doing anything to fight it off, there was an actual identity shift to the point where you did begin to identify with some of your weight? Or was it were you able to maintain the headspace of I'm a fit person doing this as an experiment the whole time? Or did you actually, even against your best efforts, start to identify with some of the extra weight?
There was a moment where I was going on the Dr. Oz show, and I was about 3 or 4 days left of gaining weight, right? So I was about to turn the corner to lose the weight. And there I was reflecting on my journey of where I was, and I was thinking of all the work that had to go into meal prep and exercise and feeling sore and feeling tired and breathing heavy and like starting from the bottom of the mountain, like I mentioned. And it occurred to me, the idea of that change seems so difficult to get back to fit. Like the amount of work that has to go into it, I know what it requires. And I see why some people get stuck. And so this happened on my first journey where I'm like, man, I recognize now why people get stuck, because here they are 70, 80, 100 pounds overweight, right? They know what they have to do to get back in shape, to get back to fit, but it's a long process. It's not like they just work out once and then they're back. It's a long process. And some people are like, you know what? I'm actually pretty comfortable. Like I can still walk or run. I can still feel pretty much healthy. Like I know I'm not healthy and I might be a little bit uncomfortable with a few things, but the idea of like getting back to where I know I should be seems so uncomfortable that people get stuck in this comfort zone. And so that kind of reflection really helped me realize that, man, I can understand why people get stuck here, because it feels so comfortable, right? And then, but fast forward to the journey I'm on now, doing this the second time as a 40-year-old, this time around, I had zero issues being attached to my body image. Like this time around, I was taking my shirt off. I was going to Hawaii, didn't mind being overweight, like, rocking the dad bod. Like I didn't care, because this time around, I'm not attached to my body image as my self-image. And I know that my body is temporary. Back then, I was so obsessed with my body image. I was so obsessed with what people thought about me that it really, it caused that identity crisis. But now that I've done a lot of personal development work and self-help work, with books and therapy and life coaching, I've been able to detach my self-image from my body image. So this time around, I was way more comfortable being, 60 pounds overweight compared to last time.
Yeah, it's way more comfortable. It's still such a funny thing to say.
Yeah.
It was very comfortable being overweight. But so let's talk about this though, because you brought up another thing that I think this is a trap that I fall into. Okay, so I'm this is my own personal issues, but the difference between weight and health. I think there's so many people who they're so busy either trying to lose weight or focusing on their weight and the scale. And I'm not saying that there's not an indication of truth on the scale, but what's the contrast between somebody worrying about do I have the right weight and am I actually healthy? Because you can have a thin person who's doing, I would put myself in this category. Okay, I don't feel like I'm overweight. However, I still get winded playing with my kids. I don't work out enough to where I can really throw my kids around and play with them for an extended period of time. And so I look fine, in my opinion. I don't have any bad physique problems. But from a health perspective, there's a difference there. So go ahead and talk more about that contrast.
Yeah, thank you for letting me bring this up, because this is so important, especially in the industry where it's so focused on weight loss. It's so focused on body image, low body fat percentage, and that's our perception of success. To get to success or have success in this industry, it requires your body to become smaller. And this is where I think people have it wrong, where they equate weight loss to health. I think in general, yes, if you are morbidly obese, if you are obese or even overweight and you lose some weight, whichever means you lose that weight, probably is a better thing for you health-wise than holding on to that weight. I just want to make that very clear. Like just because you're losing weight, just because you're skinny, doesn't mean that you're necessarily healthy. And this is why it's so important to do things like blood work and do other tests other than just jumping on the scale. Because we think, oh, if this number's going down, I'm automatically getting healthier. But if you're eating processed foods and you're not sleeping well throughout the night, you're not managing your stress, your hormones are all over the place, you might look good on the outside, but that doesn't mean necessarily like if you go get your blood work done, you could still have some serious health issues. If you eat 1,000 calories of donuts and soda versus 1,000 calories of, broccoli and vegetables and healthy, a healthy amount of protein, you're going to look different and you're going to feel different on the inside versus, if you ate, the healthy whole food. So that's why I want people to understand, like when it comes to health, for the most part, if you are eating mostly whole foods, right? I'm not saying you can't have a cheat meal every now and then, or you can't have like, a treat. That's not what I'm saying. But if you eat mostly whole foods, you do some form of exercise that feels good to you, that gets your body moving, where you're sweating, your muscles are sore. Every once in a while, you do hard things. That right there is probably a healthy lifestyle. Plus, on top of that, managing your stress. So walking out in nature, meditating, journaling, gratitude lists, like these kinds of things that help, lower our blood pressure, but also help us to manage our stress that we have from our life. And then on top of that, sleeping like you're getting paid to do it. Like if you sleep like it's your full-time job, you'll make that a priority. You will not try and sacrifice hours of sleep to get more work done, because you're burning candle from both ends on that situation, and eventually you're going to get burnt out. And so that's why managing your stress and sleeping is so important as well to a healthy lifestyle. And so those kind of 4 pillars of health that I just mentioned, eating, food, exercise, sleep, and stress management are the pillars of health. If you're focusing on those things, most likely you're going to be somewhat skinnier or more fit, in general, if you're doing those things. But also your blood work and how you feel is affected, for the better in that situation. And so don't think that just because you have a 6-pack or just because you're losing weight is going to mean that you're going to necessarily be healthy. It's about those 4 pillars of health that I just mentioned that need to be, taken care of and nurtured, so that the overall health is improved. And so that's kind of the difference. That's kind of what I try and get people to understand is like, look, it's cool to lose weight, but that doesn't mean that you're actually going to be, feel better about yourself. In general, yes, more weight loss equals better health for the most part, but just because that's happening to you doesn't necessarily mean that your health is improving.
Absolutely. So one of the things that and again, I wasn't really aware of you the first time you went through this journey. And I have done enough research to understand why you did it the first time. Why did you choose to do it again? Like, what was the motivation or the spurring on of the thought of like, I need to do this as an older individual, or is it just about branding? Is it about business and eyeballs? Like, what was the driver to say, let's do this again?
Very good question. So just like you mentioned, there's a few different reasons, but like you mentioned, you didn't really follow it in 2011. A lot of people didn't follow it, to be honest with you. They heard about it after the fact, because in 2011, social media wasn't what it is today. And so I knew back then, not a lot of people actually saw the journey as it was happening now, that I have, way more followers on social media, more eyes, there's more platforms that people use, and we're way more addicted to social media nowadays versus in 2011. So I felt like, one, there was an opportunity to do this again where it would be more impactful, more educational, more inspirational, more powerful, to make more of an impact, right? The second reason was because ever since my first experiment, I gained so much empathy. And I feel like empathy is something that's missing in the fitness industry. And I felt like if I could do this a second time, doing it would bring eyes to my journey, because it's like a train wreck. You can't, you have to watch it happen. You can't turn away from it. So it was almost like a vehicle to get my message across. And my message is one of more empathy in the fitness industry specifically, especially after the year 2020 we just had, where it's super divisive. I felt like this world needs more empathy, specifically the fitness industry for sure. And so I wanted this second journey to be a vehicle to bring my message, to increase awareness of the importance of having empathy for other people. And so that's kind of the second reason I did it. The third reason was because, being a 40-year-old, I have so many people that tell me, now that I'm older, my metabolism has changed, my hormones have changed. It's harder to keep the weight off. It's harder to lose the weight, and I feel like people, as they get older, 40, 50, 60, sometimes we think, it's just harder, and I just kind of accept it the way it is. And I'm like, look, I'm going to do this journey with you. I'll hold your hand every step of the way. Yeah, it might be harder now that you're older. You're not 20 years old anymore. But guess what? We're going to do this journey together as a team, as a community. And that's really the third reason as to why I wanted to do it again as a 40-year-old, because when you're 30, your metabolism is different for sure. You're able to recover quicker. Your hormones are in a different place. And so it's like, okay, now that I'm older, let's do this again. And then also make it more impactful, more educational, more inspirational for people, so that this time around, people are blown away at all of this. So anyways, that was kind of my my reasoning for doing it a second time.
Awesome. So on the first time, what was your primary vehicle? And I'm going to say vehicle because I think there's a lot of different ways to fuel your body, and different bodies respond better to different types of fuel. What was the primary strategy you used for weight loss in the first one? I know in the second one, I love your check-in days and seeing it when you were explaining, hey, I'm eating this, and this. And I'm honestly in shock that you could even eat that much food. I don't know how you ate as much food as you ate on the way up to it. I'm just like, ow, who eats that much? I don't know. Maybe apparently there's people who do, but it's not me for sure. But then on the way down, I like seeing that, hey, this is how this diet or this fuel, this type of food affected my body. This is how this one affected my body. And it's like a week structured thing. And so I'm curious, what was the difference between the weight loss journey on the first one and the second one in aspect of how you fueled your body?
Yeah. So back then in 2011, my approach was a standard fitness approach based off the information I had back then, which was more of like I would say paleo-ish approach, not 100% paleo, but mostly whole foods, 5 to 6 meals per day, spread out every 2 or 3 hours, right? Pretty high protein, not super high carb, but, moderate amount of carbohydrates and a moderate or low amount of fat. And it worked, like doing 5-6 small meals a day. I had a meal prep all the time, had to be really consistent with my meal timing. And I lost 75 pounds in 6 months and got back to fit. This time around, I'm using a different strategies because obviously, as you know, I have my own keto book and I'm a big fan of the ketogenic diet. And I've just upgraded my knowledge of nutrition over the past 10 years, of course. And so now I'm using a different strategy, which is mostly consists of keto, right? High fat, moderate protein, low carb diet. But there's some tweaks to that. Like, I did a Mediterranean style of keto, which is more poly and monounsaturated fats. So more like olive oil and avocado oil instead of saturated fats from like red meat and dairy. So we kind of limit those things. And then I did do an experiment with different diets, paleo, vegan, and vegetarian, and incorporated those because what I wanted to do with those popular diets, even with keto, was educate people on, look, there's these 4 popular diets here in America that a lot of people do. Keto, paleo, vegan, and vegetarian. Here's the issues that I have is people fall into these pitfalls and they make these mistakes when they just jump into these diets without doing any research. And they just jump into it thinking, oh, if I do this diet, I'll be healthier and it'll just magically work. And people fall into these traps of gravitating towards processed or comfort foods that fit into those categories. So on keto, I had a lot of bacon and cheese and, keto donuts and keto ice cream and keto bars and keto desserts. And like, that was most of my calories, which came from those types of foods. And then on paleo, same thing. I did a dirty version of that. Same thing with vegan and vegetarian, to educate people on what not to do. And I ended up gaining weight on those diets and it was actually really bad for my health, doing blood work on those. And then, on the journey back to fit, I've revisited those diets and I just finished a 4-week experiment where I did those diets again for a week at a time, but I did them in a healthy way in a caloric deficit and show people the difference side by side of like, the video will be coming out soon, the blood work, comparing those things. And then also, other metrics like my sleep data, my glucose levels throughout the day, my performance in the gym, my recovery, all those things I'm kind of comparing and contrasting. So it was just a little experiment. And then this month I'm going back to a keto approach, but with some intermittent fasting in there. And then we will cycle carbs in on the weekends, which I'll teach people how to do that. So it was a different protocol this time around versus the first time around. Let's just say that.
Yeah. No, I like it though. I think it's really important because I've had friends who are like, oh, I'm all keto, but then they're eating all of the bad things and just like, well, it's keto, so it's fine. Or they're in paleo or they're in vegetarian or whatever. I'm just like, okay, I had a conversation with somebody who I was saying, oh, well, if you're, because they were trying to be vegetarian for whatever reason. And so I was like, oh, I guess you can't have eggs, right? Or whatever it was. I forget exactly what it was, but because he'd made a big stink about this specific thing. So I was like, oh, well, I bet that these, whatever it was, I think it was eggs, but these are better than the candy or the cake that you're eating.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, these are keto. And I'm like, okay, like sugar might be keto, but it's worse for you than something that's not vegetarian. Like whatever it is, I don't know what the actual terms of all the diets are. So I'm not the expert.
That's okay. That's okay.
But point is, there's definitely a healthy and an unhealthy way of doing that. That's why I love that you've kind of exposed that. And really, I'm excited to see the blood work and all the other metadata to back that up of like how it actually affected your body. Because I think that's such a crucial thing when we're going into any type of health, is actually looking at the health and the blood work. What percentage would you say of people actually get blood work done? Not just because their doctor said, hey, you need blood work done, but like are regularly doing blood work just to know what their health is as part of their regular health routine?
My guess, if I had a guess, would be a very low percentage of people, just because people only care about weight. Like even as much as I preach, other forms of markers that measure health, I think most people tend to not care about the blood work as much. As long as they feel fine. If they have heart problems, they have heart pain in their chest, or they have a hard time breathing and they feel like something's wrong, then they go to get their blood work done. My hope is to change that, but it's probably a low percentage of people actually get their blood work done to test to see if this protocol, eating keto or eating vegan, is actually healthy for me. And I tell people, look, if you're getting your oil changed in your car more often than you're getting your blood work done, you're probably going to end up with a problem someday if you don't know ahead of time of what's actually happening inside of your body. And so it's, I know we tend to wait until we have a serious problem, and then we were like, oh, okay, now I need to change this, instead of preventing it from happening, right? And using a preventive approach instead of like waiting until something serious happens and then taking medication to put a Band-Aid on that and try and fix that symptom, rather than getting to the root cause of most of these issues. So
awesome. So when you wrote your book the first time, what was the main purpose of writing the Complete Keto book?
So my first book was actually Fit to Fat to Fit. That was like my first journey, kind of describing to people what I went through and what I learned. And so that one's different. Complete Keto, I wrote after I stumbled upon keto and ended up falling in love with it, and then started educating people on it. The reason I wanted to write my own keto book was because my approach to transformation is different than just your typical personal trainers. Like most people in the fitness industry, it's all about, okay, how to, get that body composition down, lose weight, lose fat, get stronger, get this body. And yes, that's sexy, but I think my approach is more of a holistic approach, where it's like, hey, it's a complete transformation. So in my book, Complete Keto, I talk about, of course, the meal plans, the recipes, the workouts, like all of that stuff we know we're supposed to do. But on top of that, it's help on the mental and emotional side to help people become more fulfilled where they're at now. Even though they're not like at the ideal weight, I teach them, how to operate out of a place of self-love versus self-hate, and how to become more fulfilled with themselves before they even start their journey. And then that journey becomes so much more enjoyable, instead of hating that journey of dieting and exercising and trying to lose weight, and people just become miserable and they end up getting burnt out and then going back to their old ways because they think that's happiness, and that's true self-love, is by going back to their old habits. And so, my approach is a little bit different, trying to educate people on the mental and emotional side as much as the physical.
Yeah, I know you've been doing this for quite, at this point, years. But do you feel like your primary clientele, the mindset of your clientele has actually changed from before you did your first journey to where you are now? I just know for myself, when I'm working with somebody who just wants one objective, then their mindset's different. The moment I shifted my business into a more legacy of meaning and started focusing on everything I do from a perspective of what's the purpose behind it, then my actual clients changed as far as who I was working with. They are more introspective, and they are more caring about the actual process than they care about the outcome. But before, it was just like, I just want the outcome. Like, tell me whatever I need for the outcome. And then as I shifted my orientation and how I was marketing, then I started to get a lot more people who really want the whole process, and they want that transformation rather than just the result. So have you found something similar, and how so? Has that built up?
Yeah, 100%. Like ever since, my first journey, I've evolved so much as who I am as an individual. And so as my people start to consume my content, my messaging, they start to realize that there's more to what I'm saying than just how to get skinny, how to get fit, thinking once I get this body, then all my problems will be solved. And so a lot of people that gravitate towards me now tell me it's because of the empathy factor that, I preach and talk about all the time, is the empathy factor. And I think that's where people feel like it's a safe place for them to come over here. And then they start to listen to me kind of talk about how it's not about the results, how it's about falling in love with the process, and that you're worth it to fight for your health, no matter if the results come. And we'll talk about ways to, increase your results for sure, but don't attach your emotions, your success, your happiness to those results. We find ways to enjoy the process or be fulfilled in just the process alone. And when we do that, that's what happens. I try and teach people this. If you just focus on falling in love with the process because you realize you're worth it now to fight for your health, and you operate out of self-love, you accept yourself as you are, and then you start doing that process because you enjoy it, you enjoy the way it makes you feel in the long run, the results end up taking care of themselves over time anyways. And that's where people are like, oh my gosh, now I'm so much happier and more fulfilled. Instead of doing this as a chore and beating myself up to go to the gym and diet, now I'm doing it because I know I'm worth it to fight for my health. And then the results end up coming because they're not so focused on just the results. They're focused on living that process as a lifestyle change instead of like, okay, I'm going to go all out for 60 days, lose as much weight as I can, be miserable, but then, eventually go back to my old ways and then repeat, that cycle over and over again.
Yeah. So I'm curious in your coaching, I'm going to describe a personal situation between my wife and I, and a thought that I had, it was a few years back. And I'm curious how often or what level you think this plays into it. Cause I think I'm I come from neuropsychology. That's where I pretty much studied in college, and very much into the energy and the realization that we're all just atomic parts and we're all actually connected. So yeah. This is the position that this question's coming from.
Okay.
My wife, after her first child, so in between our two kids, she was starting to lose weight. She obviously gained some weight during pregnancy, and so she was losing weight. And I remember cuddling with my wife, have my arm around her, and unconsciously, this goes back to the conversation, the identity, unconsciously, I had started to, and not that I don't want her to have her physique back and that she doesn't want it. I think both of us consciously, we wanted her to have the size and shape and whatever that she wanted, the health that she wanted. But subconsciously, my identity for her had shifted to, my wife has she was pregnant for 9 months. So she was a little bit heavier, so I started seeing her that way, experiencing her that way. She fit into my life as a heavier person because she was pregnant. And then as she started to lose weight, my thought process was, I'll never forget this thought. I was like, whoa, that's such a wild thing. I still was like, well, I had the emotional reaction as she was losing weight to like, man, my wife is disappearing. Where's my wife going? Because my wife is bigger, because she was pregnant. So then she's losing weight. I'm like, this isn't the same girl that I've been sleeping with for the last few years, or not the last few years, but the last few months. And this is weird, right? So my projection subconsciously was for her to keep her weight.
Yeah.
So what level does that play into your clients and helping them lose weight, is managing what other people's expectation of them is? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And this is kind of where, when it comes to couples specifically, it can be tricky because, like you said, your version of her identity was that, she was going to be this bigger person after having a baby, but then she wanted to change for herself. And this is where, once you realize for your own, you do the internal work on yourself and you would detach your body image as your self-image. Once you overcome that and realize, hey, my body's temporary. My body isn't always going to look this way. And my identity is based a little bit on my body, but it's not completely my identity. And once you start to do that work on yourself and realize that for yourself, then you can see your wife and realize that, hey, if she's losing weight, like that's her identity isn't based on her body. right? And to get to that point, you have to do that work on yourself first and foremost, and then it's easier to look at someone else like your spouse, and then realize that they're doing this because they want to better themselves. I think a lot of times with couples, sometimes it comes from a place of fear or insecurity of like, okay, this person's getting smaller, they're going to leave me, they might do whatever, because you just create stories around it. And instead of supporting them and being like, oh, I want to do this with you, we can kind of we can kind of guilt or shame that person into feeling bad for what they're doing, to come back to our level to make us feel safe about ourselves, which is very selfish. And a lot of people, if you start to realize it and see it from that perspective, hopefully you will stop doing that behavior of like making that person feel ashamed that they're trying to better their health. And you have to deal with your own fears and insecurity if that's the case. I'm not saying that's the case with you, but I'm just saying, from my perspective, what you're telling me, it has mostly to do with, okay, realizing that your identity isn't based on your body, and your wife's identity shouldn't be based on her body. She's more than her body. You are more than your body in this situation. It's a part of your identity, but it's not your complete identity. So once you realize that, it's easier to look at someone who wants to change their body after having a baby, and you can support them more. You can cheer them on. You can do that journey with them and say, hey, let's do this together as a team. And it's a bonding moment for you guys to be like, now we have a common goal in mind. And that tends to help out couples in these situations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just fascinating that I had that thought. And I've had the thought since with my own self, because I have stairs in my office. And sometimes after holidays, after I eat too much, I just sometimes don't have the self-control to not eat it if it tastes good. But I remember a very similar, like a time when I was going down the stairs and my whole chest, like my man boobs were shaking, my belly was, I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't identify with this thing that's moving on the front of my body is not part of me. It was weird. So then I started going to the gym again, but that's, that's my weakness. I when I see, okay, I don't identify with that, then I'm willing to go do something, and go lose the weight just to the point where I'm back into my identity. But I think that Overton window continues to shift as we get more comfortable. And this goes really with anything in our life. We're specifically talking about weight today with Drew, but it happens in your relationships. It happens in your parenting. It happens with your relationship with your kids. It happens in business. It literally happens everywhere, where the more you're exposed to a certain thing, the more comfortable you become with that. And the harder it is for you to see that there even is a change. It's interesting. So I want to ask you this again. When you started Fit2Fat2Fit, because the way I view Fit2Fat2Fit, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I view it more as a brand rather than a company. And the separation of brand versus company is, in my mind, a brand can go into different spaces and have it be normal, right? You can go into sleep. You could go into whatever area you need to, and it would still make sense. You could have a clothing line that still makes sense, because Fit2Fat2Fit is a brand. Whereas if you're just a personal trainer and you're helping people lose weight, that's just a company and that's what you do, versus a brand being a movement and something that can cross between. You got to make sure you take yourself off mute for this. But so that is I'm curious, did you know that you were starting a brand, or did it turn into a brand after?
It didn't start out as that. It didn't start out as this movement. It started out as an idea, and then we'll see where this idea goes. Because I had a full-time job in the medical field when I started Fit2Fat2Fit, not knowing what would happen. Maybe the local news would pick it up. I didn't know what to expect until it just took off and it went viral. And then I'm like, okay, book deals, TV shows, like, what do I do now? I'm going to make this into a career. And here's my movement, or here's my messaging that comes from this journey. So it kind of really developed into that. 10 years ago, when I started this, I had no idea what I was doing. Now I have a very clear, concise, idea of what I want to, how I want to show up, and the message I want to get across.
Yeah, I think that's so cool to see the journey of starting and creating something and seeing what you've been able to produce. If somebody wanted to really get engaged with you, and either follow your journey, let's talk about where to follow your journey. I follow it on Instagram primarily, but I do see it on Facebook sometimes as well. But where's the best place to follow your journey? Where's the best place to interact with you or your team? And then if they were interested in being coached, how much of that are you actually doing now? how could they get involved?
Yeah, so the quickest, easiest place to go is just fit2fat2fit.com with the number 2 in between. And that'll, direct you everywhere, as far as if you want to join the program, if you want to listen to my podcast, purchase my books, whatever. On social media, if you want to interact with me, it's at fit2fat2fit with the number 2, obviously, once again. And then, if they go to fit2fat2fit.com, they should be able to click on the Back to Fit journey, which is what I'm doing now. And they could join me on that journey. I don't coach people one-on-one right now, but I am launching a coaching platform soon where I'm certifying coaches underneath my brand and my name under the Fit2Fat2Fit brand. And they will be, kind of like my master coaches that help me get my message across and start training clients, because people want a client like a Fit2Fat2Fit trainer, someone with empathy, someone that understands the mental and emotional side, that isn't judgmental, that isn't, that has an understanding of these things that we just mentioned on this podcast. That's the type of new breed of trainers that I'm trying to create. And so I'm in the process of creating that right now, and that will be launching very soon.
So question about that, if somebody who's listening to this is a personal trainer and feels like they would be a good fit to be one of your master trainers, how are you going about selecting those trainers? And is it like open for application? Is it only people that you know specifically and have already vetted? Like
It's people that have done my my certification course, which is on my website as well. If you go to my website and click on programs, click become a coach. Under the programs, there's a certification course that you take. If you pass that, then you get accepted into applying for the position. And right now we're only hiring a handful of trainers, or coaches, if you will, once they pass the certification course. So just because you do it doesn't mean you're automatically going to become one. But if you do it and this is something you want to do, the first step is to become a certified coach, do the certification course. And then from there, you and I will have a one-on-one conversation and do it like an interview to see if you're a good fit to represent the Fit2Fat2Fit brand.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important to be able to, I've seen it in my own life. At some point, you can only do so much. Yeah. And you have to let other people take the reins as far as actual one-on-one coaching aspects with a lot of clients. So I think that's incredible. Go check out his website, Fit2. So both, anytime that he says 2, he's talking about the number 2.
Yep.
Number. So it's fit, number 2, fat, number 2, fit.com. So I just want to be absolutely clear because it can be confusing sometimes, but Fit2Fat2Fit. And then this next section is called Legacy on Rapid Fire. Are you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. What do you think is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
Self-limiting beliefs.
Okay. Any one particular that you feel is like that you're trying to attack right now?
I think more so on the financial side. I think, like I mentioned, self-limiting beliefs. We grew up thinking like, okay, I'm only capable of achieving this amount of success in life. And, every day is a work to be like, no, I can create more I can do more than what I'm thinking for myself, because I've already achieved things outside of that self-limiting belief, and be like, okay, if I can do this, I can do these other things as well. And so mostly it has to do with business, not so much financial, but like from a business structure of what I want to create for my company, 5, 10, 15 years from now.
Awesome. What's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
That's a good question. There's so many different, it would either have to be my 100-mile race, which I just did in June of 2020. I've never ran a marathon before that. And I trained to run 100 miles in 24 hours. And that was definitely one of the hardest things I've accomplished. Fit2Fat2Fit is also one of the hardest things I've accomplished too. And doing it a second time, it's been just even more humbling. And then post-life, surviving my divorce. It's hard to choose between those 3 or 4 things because they're hard in different ways.
Mm-hmm. What's the greatest accomplishment to this point in your life?
Being a dad.
Agreed. What would you say is one secret habit, mindset, or behavior that you believe contributes the most to your success?
I think my morning routine, like being consistent with my morning routine, because my morning routine trains my brain to become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And when it does that, it carries over into other areas of my life of being disciplined and like diet, and exercise. So meditating, making my bed, taking a cold shower, doing a gratitude journal, positive affirmations, those kinds of things every morning set my day to be, more successful, more productive than if I don't do those things.
Awesome. And what's one or two books that you would recommend to the Fuel Your Legacy audience? Definitely recommend yours, but if you have others, you think they can benefit this.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think every human should read the 4 Agreements. That's a really, really good book. Another one that I think is highly beneficial to everyone is Ego is the Enemy. And then one more would be Daring Greatly by Brene Brown.
All 3 fantastic books. And then his books are Fit to Fat to Fit, correct?
Yep. And then, number 2.
And then the Complete Keto. And that one is, it's something you could read, but it's also much of a workbook and recipes, and it's a very involved book, correct?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I think people are really pleasantly surprised when they open up the recipes. Over 75 recipes in there. They all taste amazing. They're easy to make. I think you'll really enjoy the read too. It's not too complicated or too long.
Yeah, love it. Okay, so this is the last question, and it's my favorite question. We not because we're going to pretend that you died, but because of the result. But we are going to pretend that you've died. And now we're 6 generations from now. So this is your great grandchildren. They're sitting around a table discussing your life, the impact you had, and the legacy you left. What do you want them to be saying about your legacy 6 generations from now?
Man, that's a question I contemplate quite a bit. Like, is anyone even going to remember me 100 years from now other than my family? My hope is that yes. And my hope is that they remember 2 things. One, I showed up and became the best dad to my 2 daughters as I could. And then 2, he was about spreading more empathy in this world, bringing more empathy to this world, doing some good. Other than that, I could care less if I made millions or not, if I was broke. But those 2 things, my hope is that people remember me for that.
Awesome. I love it. And ever since I've met you, that's what I've thought. And I've loved following your journey. I was so glad that I saw you do the Fit to Fat to 40 again, because I'm like, oh, now I get to be aware. I mean, in 2009, I don't think I was even on Facebook. I was just like, nothing was going on in my life then. So it's cool to see the whole process again. And it's definitely inspiring. And think, okay, well, how could I do something similar, not just in my own health, but the innovation of doing something like this, that strategy in business? Like what area of life are you not relating to? And it directly applies to parenting, because parenting is hard, and it's so easy to say, well, I'm the adult, I'm the parent, I have a different set of rules than my kids do, but a 3-year-old doesn't understand that. And so it really is a good mirror to say, okay, how are we as a group going to go through this and set rules that we're all going to follow together, And so it's been very fascinating being a dad. Got a long way to go, but that's definitely a big growth thing. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insight. I hope everybody goes and watches your thing and reaches out to you if they have interest in either being a client or a coach.
Thanks so much for having me on, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.